Hey everybody, Some Gadget Guy here, and it is time to check out some video footage from the new larger sensor shooter on the back of the Galaxy S5. Starting off with a bright outdoor lit flower, we do see Samsung's general tendency towards oversaturating and overexposing ever so slightly. Detail in the middle of this flower is starting to blur out. We're starting to clip some of those highlights, but in all, we're seeing excellent color reproduction and very nice dynamic range between those leaves in the shade in the background, and a very nice subtle depth of field effect between the foreground and the background of this shot. Looking at a wall of tiny pink flowers in direct sunlight, we do see a little clipping on some of the brighter or lighter flowers, but in all, we're seeing really good dynamic range, maintaining color accuracy across the frame. Even if the colors are just a touch too saturated, at least this is better than some of the other phones that we've tested in this test, which undersaturate scenes like this. And here's a white flower in direct sunlight. You can see ever so slightly it clipping on the right-hand side of the flower, but the Galaxy S5 is doing a remarkably decent job of making sure that detail in the scene is maintained. Checking out a view of mostly red. Red is a very difficult color for digital image sensors to properly expose for, and here we can definitely see the Galaxy S5 falling prey to their decision to subtly overexpose and oversaturate color. Most of the detail in these red flowers is almost completely lost. And this is a very common trait with Galaxy phones, emphasizing vibrant color over accuracy. A common theme of talking about this sensor is going to be its depth of field performance. Now that it's got a larger sensor on par with the one found on the Nokia Lumia Icon in 1520, you can see how the background is subtly blurred out in a very pleasant way, and the flower in the foreground is nice and crisp and clear. Same here with this bunch of flowers, that you can see the crosswalk sign is blurry and soft, and it really does help draw the eye to the subject of your video, especially when compared to camera sensors like the HTC One M8 or the iPhone 5S. This is a much more photographic or cinematic look for our video in being able to blur the background. Into a walking test, the Galaxy S5 does not have hardware optical image stabilization, but it does use a software image stabilization, which works reasonably well for smoothing out this scene. There is a jarring or buzzy quality, and whenever you do employ it, it crops in so that the lens, which already isn't very wide angle, is sort of reduced even further. I don't find this effect to be as pleasant as phones that actually use hardware image stabilization, but this does help tremendously in evening out all of the little bumps and jostles that our phones go through while we're shooting video. And it's at least on par with phones like the iPhone 5S. Now checking out a street scene, the S5 does a reasonably good job of tracking movement entering and exiting the frame. Here again, we can see that slight tendency at overexposing with any cars that are white that travel through the frame, like this truck or that little Toyota. We're starting to lose detail in the white on those vehicles there. One of my favorite features on Galaxy smartphones, though, is the focus is very sure-footed. You don't see it constantly jockeying throughout the frame to try and pick some focus point. Once you've set the video in play, it locks on, and then it's very smooth and reliable performance. And those focus adjustments are much more subtle than what we see on LG and HTC cameras. And checking out the view from a freeway overpass, we see excellent dynamic range, with the sky still being blue. We see lush green in all of the trees along the sides of the freeway, and all of the colors are bright and vibrant of all the cars passing by. Again, subtle clipping on any cars that are white. Samsung has done a tremendous job in stepping up audio performance on the Galaxy S5, and it's very close to competing with phones like the Nokia Lumia Icon's quad microphone array, and that you can hear the subtle clicks and bumps of car tires rolling over brakes on the US 101 here. This is some of the best audio performance I've heard on an Android phone. Into our exposure test, moving from a dark scene to a bright scene, Samsung has some kind of magic voodoo or special sauce in that they still have the phones which handle this test the best, in my opinion. Very subtle bloom effects between different scenes and different exposure values. And also that focus stays very, very sure-footed, and it's not dancing around the frame trying to guess what we're trying to lock onto. Even moving quickly, you can see just how pleasant that transition is from dark to light and from light to dark. I really have not found any phones that can perform this test better. Into a zoom test, the Galaxy S5 isn't going to unseat any Nokias out there, but it does a reasonably good job of zooming into the frame using some sort of pixel resampling so that detail isn't lost. And this is one of the advantages of having a higher resolution sensor. Having that 16 megapixel shooter on the back gives us the equivalent of around a 3x or a 4x zoom without losing a significant amount of detail. Into a nighttime driving scene, this is definitely a grainier, noisier image, and we can see a lot of noise reduction, blurring some of the detail in the frame to try and maintain a more pleasant image. But I've always enjoyed that Samsung cameras tend not to reduce the frame rate like LG cameras do, where in nighttime shots, LG will reduce the frame rate down to around 15 frames per second. Here, we still have 30 frame per second video, and it's another opportunity to see just how good Samsung's autofocus is, even in these low light conditions. And as cars drive through this frame, it's nice to see that the focus isn't getting confused by the movement entering and exiting the scene. We can also assume that the Galaxy S5 is getting a little bit of a low light performance bump thanks to that larger image sensor over the Galaxy S4. You're simply weighing the physics of having more surface area to soak up light, probably giving us about a half a stop advantage over last year's Galaxy. Here's a flower in almost zero light, and we can see how degraded the image gets, but the Galaxy S5 does a reasonably good job of at least exposing some kind of image for us to see. Ditto our creepy gate here, and this is going to be one of those personal preference situations. I actually really do like that Samsung's white balance errs on the side of reality, that this is what this image looks like more in real life than trying to properly expose for the color white on that gate. The lighting here is very yellow, and Samsung is representing that very accurately, which is what we also see with this creepy tunnel. And we have enough color information off of this image sensor to also see the whitish bluish lights leading down the tunnel. The facade of this is lit by a very harsh yellow street light, the interior is bluish street light, and the Galaxy S5 is doing an excellent job of representing those colors accurately. Because as we can see on an alley scene, when the lighting is bluer or whitish, the Galaxy S5 is also giving us better color representation there as well. Samsung's done something pretty fantastic by moving the Galaxy S5 up into a larger image sensor, and they've really closed the gap between themselves and Nokia. We now have an Android phone which is capable of competing with the Lumia 1520 and the Lumia Icon. I still don't think there are any Android phones which compete against the Lumia 1020, but at least now we have an Android phone that can easily stand toe-to-toe with some of the best cameras that Nokia has to offer, and all of the subtle benefits that come with that larger image sensor, like better low light performance and a much nicer bokeh and a shallower depth of field. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching my videos, sharing, subscribing, hitting that thumbs up button, and dropping me all those great comments down at the bottom. I've always appreciated the discussions we've gotten into, and I will catch you all on the next review.